I just had a little bit of an epiphany that I want to share with you all around the architecture for a lot of the stuff that I'm working on with the Blue Standard. So first, I just wanted to show you, these are some of the projects I'm working on. The one I was just working on then is Augment Quasar, but there's a few of these. We've got ViewAuth as well, which needs a bit of a revisit. But if you haven't tried ViewAuth, one of the things it does is you've got the component aspect, the composable aspect of it. So the part of it that's completely decoupled from Quasar, and all it does is allow you to create implementations of contracts. So the way you authenticate is always the same. The API is always the same, but then you can choose different contracts like Supabase or Laravel or whatever your backend is. Because it turns out authentication is pretty much the same across the board. So I did this a while ago. And as I've been talking about, we've also got View Model, which is kind of the same concept, but for dealing with a backend. And there's a couple more that I want to build. So View Actions, that I just talked about in the last video, isn't built yet. View Listeners, I've kind of built prototypes for it, but I haven't, sort of standardized that into an API. But the idea is, so we got all these sort of packages, or there's kind of four of them now. There's View Auth, View Model, View Actions, and View Listener. Now, one of the things I did with View Auth that was really, really cool is I built components that would work with any authentication provider. So since we have a contract here, since the API is always going to look the same, no matter what the provider is, I was able to create a library where basically all of the components are generated for you, and it would work no matter what your backend was. So you still had things like changing the password, the login page, the register page, and all of those components, they didn't have to change. The components all work the same, but you could use different backends for those components. So it's really, really cool because you only have to write the components once and they work for all your backends. And then I kind of realized this is sort of what I was doing with Augment Quasar, where you can do the same thing with models. So the idea is I wanted to have a table component in Augment Quasar that would work with any implementations for View Model. And that's especially good for things like filtering. So if you've got a filter component that does all this advanced filtering stuff, you can create that component in Augment Quasar and tell it that it relies on View Model. So then that filter component will work with a Laravel backend or a Supabase backend, etc. Right? You already know the story. But then I thought, why not do the same thing for everything? Why not just keep following this concept every time we create a composable? So one of them, I'm not sure if I've got it in here yet, is for dealing with files. I think that's going to be part of View Model. So one of the things you'll be able to do with View Model is work with files. And so we should have a component for that where it doesn't matter what backend you're using. You can use this file upload tool within Augment Quasar and it'll work with any View Model implementation of working with files. And so what I've decided is I'm going to break up Augment Quasar based on these different projects. So I've already got it here for View Model. So Augment Quasar is going to have a View Model version. So that would be like at Augment Quasar / here it is, View Model. But then we'll have another one for authentication. So at Augment Quasar / View Auth. And then we'll have at Augment Quasar / what's one of the other ones we've got? View Actions. So even View Actions will have its own components. So if you want to have a component that just triggers an action, for example, we've got a component for that. So maybe for an admin panel, you just want to list all of your actions and be able to trigger them and be able to use maybe like a JSON schema representation of the params that need to be sent through to those actions. So stuff like that is all going to be possible. View Listener will now be able to create tools. So if we create Augment Quasar / View Listener, we can then create some tooling around listening to components. So I'm just thinking of this off the cuff, but maybe you could have a component where you pass it all of your models. So View Listener, in fact, View Listener might actually belong inside of View Model. Or maybe we'll have two. One that's View Listener that can listen to anything, and then one that's opinionated that works with View Model. But anyway, if you had like a listener for a model and the way you listen for model changes is always the same, then you could create a component that says, hey, here's all of the models that I want you to display in this component, and then just listen to all of them. So then you can have a really nice kind of admin component or like developer component that shows you all of your models, and you can click on it and say, listen for the events in this model, and then you can test if they work to see if creating a model or updating or deleting a model works. Yeah, so that's just something that I kind of thought of that I wanted to bring up. And it means that in the future, we've now standardized, you know I love standards, we've now standardized a process here for tying our components, that's what Augment Quasar is, the component part, tying our components to our composables. So now whenever we come up with a concept for a composable, maybe for example, we create a set of composables for working with the Google API, or like Google Maps. That's a really good example. We might have, for example, here a Google Maps package then. So we'll have a Google Maps composable, but then a Google Maps package. Or maybe we can find a way to even abstract that. Well, it might be a bit hard. Yeah, probably it might be hard to abstract that. But anyway, then you can just kind of keep building up your library of components that marry up with your composables as well. So that was the idea I wanted to share with you. I guess maybe saying this out loud, it's kind of obvious now, but for some reason that didn't click for me. I was kind of following the view use pattern, where view use has got core, it's got another one I think called shared, and another one called integration, where they add all of their integration related stuff. And I still want to have integration for basic things like working with Numeral.js and working with Vimeo videos and stuff like that. But then I want to break up our packages a little bit further here by saying, these are the ones related to Blue Standard composables. So Blue Standard is going to have its own set of composables that we use all the time, and that will be put in here. I think file upload is a really good example now that I think about it. If we had another folder here called Augment Quasar / file upload, or maybe not just file upload, maybe you've got like, maybe we have something for working with a file tree as well. So Augment Quasar / file tree. And then you use a combination of the view upload component with view model. So view model's got like actually, yeah, in that case, it would also just belong in the view model package. But okay, imagine this now. Imagine within view model, we've got a file upload component. And then what it does is it enforces a way that it basically says you need to have a model that looks like this structure. Imagine this, right? Where it's kind of like, I can't remember exactly how you do this, but you have like a resource, maybe like a resource ID. So this would be the ID of it, which is like a string. And then you might have parent folder, and maybe something like is root. I can't remember exactly what this looks like, but basically, how you model a file structure in your database. There's like a kind of a way you can easily model file structures in your database. So in this case, this would be like parent folder ID, for example, and then maybe like is folder, or maybe you've got like folders and resources. So then this would be a folder, and it could have a parent folder, but then if that's null, it would be the root. Then you wouldn't need that anymore. And then you'd have, for example, a resource, which has got an ID. And maybe you include the link to that resource as well. And maybe like a type as well, like a MIME type. I don't know, something like that. But basically, oh, hang on. And then you'd say like folder underscore ID, and then that would match up with one of your folders here. Yeah, I'm thinking something like that. So what you would do is you could then have inside a view model a component for working with this structure. And then it doesn't care if you're using this structure with Supabase or Laravel or whatever backend, it doesn't care. All that matters is you're using this structure. And then you can have a file tree component with uploads. And this stuff's like really hard to build, but you could build it once where you can drag and drop files onto the Quasar tree component. And then you can sort of delete files and then maybe edit them and, all that sort of good stuff you can then build into this component, and you only have to do it once, and then it's going to work with any backend that you implement in the future. So I just think that's like a really cool concept that we could then sort of tie into this. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this live stream. Well, it's more than what I wanted to talk about. So that's kind of the future of where I'm heading with this. Basically having one place called Augment Quasar, which is a mono repo for all of these different packages. You got your core components for the things that I want to extend, like building my own dialogue, building delete dialogues and update dialogues and stuff like that, which would be in view model. And once that's all of, once this is all working really well and it's been sort of released to the public, then we can all work on things together. And then you can, one of the cool things about this is you can then have champions. So somebody can champion Augment Quasar, and their job is to take composables. So you might have like somebody who's good at components, someone who's good at composables. The person that's really good at composables and building APIs for that, they build those APIs, like a view model. And when they're done with it and they've decided, okay, that's it, that's what my API is going to look like, I've locked it down, these are my contracts, they can then palm it off to the person who's really good at building components. And the person that's good at building components then takes those APIs and then just builds the packaging around it, around that API. So, you can really you can really start drawing lines here and getting people to just focus on what they're really good at. I think this is something that the Vue community has done a phenomenal job at, where they've got somebody who's kind of hardcore working on the Veep project, and they've got people that are hardcore working on, a lot of Anthony Fu's projects. I don't know. I think this is part of his secret. And maybe this happens naturally, or maybe he's really good at it, but Anthony Fu seems to just be really good at getting people that sort of champion projects, like putting people in the right places. And I don't know if that's him or it's just naturally happening, but I'd love to be able to do something like this with Schema Blue, where as we build more people on the team, I can start putting people in positions where they can focus on the stuff that they're really good at. So if you love building APIs and composables, and this is what I love doing, I love thinking really hard on and gathering different APIs and going, okay, how do I build the perfect composable for something like Vue model that works with different backends? That's what I really enjoy. But then you might find somebody else whose job is to then take those concepts and then build components for it. To be honest, I kind of enjoy both of those things equally, but you tend to have people that lean towards, more one thing than the other. And it's just fun. Like, imagine how fun this would be if you're a component builder and somebody else is an API builder, and then together you guys can sort of build this really nice ecosystem, and then we can all build things faster in the future. Like, imagine if whenever we want to build with a folder structure, like resources in the future, somebody's already done all the hard work up front. And then it doesn't matter if we're working with a Microsoft backend or a Laravel backend or a whatever backend, everybody in our ecosystem can now work together and we're all on the same page. And that's kind of it at the end of the day. What we're doing here is we're getting people on the same page. Like, my dream is to be able to get to standardize all of these processes and go further than that. So rather than just saying, okay, we've now standardized how we work with backends, right? Which is, like what GraphQL does. GraphQL's kind of standardized how we work with backends. And I would argue that this is cooler, at least for me, because it goes one step further and goes into standardizing a backend with Vue.js. But once you create that standardization, you can then go one step further and go, okay, how do we tie this into components? And once you've done that, and you add all of these different layers on top as well, like you go, this is how we decide on what our data looks like. That's what schema.blue is. And that's it. There are no other ways that we describe our data. We describe our data with schema.blue. This is how we work with actions on the back end. We've thought through it, and if we ever want to change it in the future, we can make a version 2, but this is how we work with data on the back end, kind of full stop. And we keep creating these contracts and these agreements across the team. And sure, there's going to be situations where there's disagreement, but in general, if we can all sort of agree on how we do things, then we can start building on top of that. and we agree on what components we use for when we work with maps. If we can agree on components we use for when we work with phone numbers, and we just keep agreeing and building up these concepts more and more, we end up with this wonderful ecosystem where everybody's on the same page. And yeah, I just think it's really cool and a really awesome goal to sort of head towards. So hope you enjoyed this one. And thanks for sticking with me if you made it this far. By the way, if you want to contact me, if the stuff I'm talking about here is really kind of resonating with you, because I understand some people will leave halfway through because they go, okay, this isn't for me, this is too hardcore, or, you know, I rather do things my way. But if this is resonating with you, then check out, hang on, I need to close this out now. Whoops. Check me out on Discord at QuasarCast and just hit me up and send me a message saying, yo, man, this is like really cool. I want to be a part of this. And then, you know, I can sort of get an idea of what your skills are. Or if you don't think you're really skilled and you'd rather just be someone who learns about this stuff, then hey, if people are super passionate to learn, then I'm happy to chat to them on Discord and see where I can help out. So yeah, hit me up on Discord if you love this kind of thing, and I'll see you in a future video.